Everyone, thank you so much and welcome to our webinar today. So Spencer Arnold, Coach Spencer Arnold, excuse me, of Hebron Christian Academy is going to be walking us through some really cool stuff. So ultimately, we're going to talk through using thresholds to emphasize power at static load. He will be able to allow a lot more detail with that, but I will let him take it away.
Hey guys, appreciate y'all having me. Thanks, Nika. So I'm gonna try and be succinct here, but I am gonna share my screen and give y'all a couple slides. But most of it's gonna be talking communication. This will be really good if y'all will make sure and ask questions, especially as I get rolling. I know I can get out ahead of myself um, and get too far out in the weeds, and would like for y'all to, if I'm getting too far out there, just pull me back in. But and if I sound a little scatterbrained, I think my office is a good resemblance. We're in the middle of craziness at the school, and so I'll explain some of that. But yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Super excited to talk about some of the things that we do at Hebron, especially with the way we have leveraged Perch. We've had Perch for a long time now, and man, some of the things that we've gotten to do and gotten to be a part of and got to help create that I'm really excited and have seen really cool results with. So let me share this slideshow if this will work. And bingo. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. Yeah, if you can't see it, just hit the chat. But okay, so what we're going to do today is do a little bit of talking through how to leverage velocity-based training for measuring a weekly power increase. So what that means, when I saw the title and what Nika put together, I think she just put together what I said. But it's a lot of words to say. How do I create a static load, a program with a static load, right? So that that's gonna some of that's gonna be how do you reprogram your brain to think staying at the same weight for all of these weeks in a row is a good thing. So some of it's that. And then how do I make sure that I do that and still drive a specific power emphasis while maintaining static load? So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we do that, so just a quick background on who I am. So married, 3 kids. There you can see that here. The 2 girls are down here with me in the background. We went to Paris this summer for the Olympics. I had a couple athletes compete in the Olympics, so they were able to come and hang out. And then my little 2-year-old terrorist as well. So family is all I do. Love them. There's a pretty high chance that they don't remember that I told them not to break into my office in the middle of this, and so there's a chance you see all of them come running in at some point. But strength and conditioning coordinator at Hebron. Hebron Christian Academy is a pre-K through 12th grade, a private Christian school northeast of Atlanta. We are, high academic standards, high athletic standards, and have been incredibly blessed to be really successful in athletics the last couple of years. A lot of that is what's driving my ability to do some of the things that I have. When you're successful, you get resources. When you get resources, you get to do things. And so some of that is what we're doing here. We're an Olympic-based program, so everything from the floor, you're going to see a lot of snatch, a lot of clean, a lot of jerk. Reason is I'm a senior international coach. I've been doing Olympic weightlifting since I was very little. And so velocity's kind of been in the backdrop of everything I've always done. It's been really cool to measure some of that. Be real specific with that in the weight room. What is VBT? Not, I always like to lead with this slide when I talk about VBT because there's a disclaimer. You'll laugh. Like there's a disclaimer on the front end of this presentation and on the back end, right? Because it's important for everybody to understand that there's certain things that are not true of VBT, and that if you make them true, then everything that I say from here on out won't matter. And so one, it's not a replacement for your eye as a coach. Don't ever let the tech tell you what to do. You get to tell the tech what to do. Let the tech inform your decision. Second, don't let it replace your mouth as a coach, right? If you hit a threshold and they're squatting and it's too slow, that doesn't give you the right. You need to go explain to them why it's too slow. Give an opportunity to explain what that may not mean they need to change the weight. May mean they just need some instruction on how to squat. So don't let tech replace your voice. And then don't let it be a regulator for technical progression. Ultimately, your eyeballs, your intuition, your experience are the regulators for technical progression and teaching. No technology can replace you as a coach. It's just a really, really great tool in your tool belt. So before we even talk about VBT, just remember for hundreds, thousands of years, probably, we've been doing strength and conditioning without technology and have been pretty good at it. Don't think the technology somehow replaces you as a coach. It is a great asset though. Um, what is VBT? Hopefully, if you're on this call, you know what this is. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these terms underneath down here, and so I wanted to talk for a second about this terminology. VBT is essentially our ability to take our focus from load and change it to velocity so that you can program, you can categorize, and you can regulate according to the speed of the barbell, and then drive intent from the speed of the barbell versus using load, which can sometimes be a liar. And so VBT allows us, it ultimately is a mechanism by which we program and regulate workouts to get a desired or specific intent inside of these strength zones that you see below. So we're going to talk today, I'm going to talk specifically about accelerator strength and absolute strength. If you hear me say those terms, I'm talking about speeds inside these zones you see below, 7.75 to 0.5 for accelerative, and then, slower than 0.5 for absolute strength. You'll also see that above there, there's a correlating sort of one percentage of your 1 rep max or proposed 1 rep max. And so if you hear me say, hey, we're in our accelerative strength zone, I'm assuming that more than likely 80% of you are probably going to land inside 70 to 80% of 1 rep max, so on and so forth. So anyway, all that to say, how do we use it here at Hebron? And this is important because it does help give you context on why I'm able at a high school and a middle school to do things like drive specific intent using VBT at a school in our setting. It helps us for regulation during our teaching phase. So what I mean by that is if you're a sixth grader, you're using the perches. Now I can feel already some of you like, well, I don't know that a middle schooler needs to use VBT. You're probably right. They don't need to use VBT, but they can use VBT, and it does allow them to understand and apply the technology. And if I'm teaching a sixth grader how to back squat, which I'm not, but if I were, I'm teaching them how to front squat. If I'm teaching them how to front squat, I can set a threshold at 0.6 meters per second, and then it ultimately makes sure that they're moving with speed. And any sixth grade boy who's going to want to add a bunch of weight, it's going to keep them from adding a bunch of weight. So in a lot of ways, we use VBT to help regulate away from heavy load, especially in the teaching phase for what we do at the school. Second, it's an auto-regulatory mechanism for seasonal demand. So our football team's in the Final Four Friday. We'll talk more about them in a little bit, but they're right now. They are using this very second. They're using the perch to help regulate specific power output in their bench press. We're doing some weight releaser stuff downstairs, and we use it to make sure that I'm regulating above certain speeds, especially as we get deep into season, or especially if you know anything about football, there's bye weeks, right? And so our coach did a really good job of like regulating 4 or 5 games bye week, 4 or 5 games bye week. And so I can regulate down into strength work or some slower speeds where there is a like a resounding impact on their performance from that work. But I can use it to regulate in and out of those zones for seasonal demand, right? If we have an easy football game that week, maybe we do some strength work that week because there's not as much required of them in practice and in the game. And it also helps us focus on specific strength traits. So what I mean by that is, I think that, well, I know that specific parts of a athlete's life should be focused on strength. Like they should be focused on absolute strength. If you're an 8th grade or 9th grade developmental JV type athlete, there's not a whole lot of reason other than practice that they shouldn't be getting stronger. That getting stronger should be the primary focus for them in those grades. Why? Because I want them to be able to get to 10th and 11th grade, be impact varsity players, and I can't spend as much time on the base strength work, and I can afford to pull away some strength work and focus on speed and power because I've got this big base strength done. So what Perch and VBT allows me to do is to spend years intentionally focused on strength work and an athlete who's growing so rapidly that I wouldn't have been able to keep up with their progress anyway, right? Everybody knows a 9th grade boy in about October of their 9th grade year, when they get full blown puberty and have natural steroids running through their body, there's just no way for me. 80% will not be 80% ever. And so the only way that I can ensure that I'm doing true strength work with that ninth grade boy is something like a VBT system that allows me to regulate specific strength traits regardless of how fast they're progressing. Um, it also, I'm not going to run a ton of this here, but it also allows us to easily display progress. So if you're in a school setting, if you're in a high school setting, being able to prove that what you're doing is effective, and this is true in a college setting too, I guess. Prove that what you're doing is effective, that you're accomplishing the goal. That ultimately is easily displayed and showing that hey, they did 85% 6 weeks ago at this speed. Now they're doing it at this speed. Easily show progress, and this is important if you're considering how to get a perch system. One of the ways that we were able to afford and promote a system like perch is we're able to show that it gives us the ability to differentiate program design, meaning it gives us the ability, like VBT gives us the ability to say, hey, you're a senior athlete committed to Miami. Your program is going to look different than you're a ninth grade athlete who's just getting started in high school sports, and differentiate the program and be really specific about how we differentiate that. And then that last piece, like ultimately it lets us get science out of the weight room. So our statistics class uses the perch data when it does its AP statistics program. Our anatomy and physiology class talks about muscle fiber typing and uses some of the data from our systems. And so ultimately our VBT, it does so much more than just tell somebody if they're too slow or too fast. And we're going to talk about one of the ways today that we've used that, and that data has been used in a statistics class as part of their projects for the year. Slow me down if I'm going too fast. All right. So backtrack. What was the goal? What I'm going to show you is a program that we rolled out in the spring. In March, I had this dilemma. So 2 years ago, 2 springs ago, um, we got really, really strong in the off season. Like it was first year with this head coach that we currently have. His name's Coach Guess. He bought in full on to what I was doing. He let me get him really, really strong. So we got really strong. We finally had made up some gaps that we had in strength work. We got really, really strong. And then, come end of March, beginning of April, all this strength was there. And we'd worked on strength for so long. Then they got to spring practice and spring ball, and we were really sluggish. We were really slow. We didn't quite look like the football team that I thought we would look like. We were really strong. We were resilient, but we weren't able to really play football well. And we did great, but we didn't look like the team I thought we would look like. And Coach Guest kind of gave me that feedback. And so the next year through this past spring practice, my goal was one, to make us strong in the off season, but then do a quick little like power peak of sorts going into spring practice and into the spring scrimmage that ultimately would allow us, one, to make sure we didn't hurt each other. They hurt each other a lot in spring practice because one, they're boys and they like to hit, and two, they were a lot stronger than they used to be. So when they hit a lot harder. So one, let's make us a little more resilient, prepared for that, be ready for the speed piece. And then two, let's see if we could sort of emulate what it would look like to be powerful and fast in a game. And so that was the goal. The goal was to get to spring scrimmage in April and be faster and stronger at the same time than we were the previous year. And so my hypothesis there was I could have them, here we go. Yeah. I could have them eliminate total load increase for the 5 weeks, including spring practice weeks, right? For the 5 weeks of spring practice, which was 2 weeks. So 3 weeks leading in, plus the 2 weeks of spring practice and the spring scrimmage. I could eliminate load increase. So I had to like get my brain to get past the fact that we weren't going to go up in weight for 5 weeks, that we were going to stay at the same exact weight, all that I'd been taught as a student, this like linear growth of increase in weight was not going to happen, that I was going to intentionally pick one load, stay at that load for the entire 5 weeks, and that I was going to drive power increase through immediate feedback, right? Through them being able to see how fast they are right now. And then my thought was, all right, so let's, I think I ended up, it's in the next slide. I ended up doing 85% for sets of 2 in the back squat. And I said, you're going to do sets of two, and then you'll get immediate feedback on your speed, and then I'm going to give you a weekly report. So what that looked like was this kind of neat. They would, let's say week one, they came in, they did their back squats. It was three sets of two at 85%. I took all that data and then crunched it and saw, all right, what was their average velocities for each set? And then I took that and I printed it on a piece of paper and hung it in their rack form, like old school style on a magnet clip. Um, and so then they came in the next week. And what they had done previous week was, let's say it's 300 pounds for three sets of two, and their average speed at set one was 0.48. Their second set was 0.47. Their third set was 0.45 meters per second. They came in and they went to their rack to do their workout, and hanging in their rack is a piece of paper that says, last week on set one, you did 0.48. Then you did 0.47. And then you did 0.45. Well, competitive, testosterone driven football player boy, really any athlete who's competitive, girl or guy, sees that and goes, bet, right? Put 300 pounds on the bar and watch me be faster. And so there was an internal intent that was immediately given to them that said, all right, we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to be faster. And so what happens is they got a weekly report that helped them set an internal goal. And then ultimately, for 5 weeks, that piece of paper was hanging in their rack. And then I got really fancy with it. And I said, if they had gone up from the week before, I highlighted that green. If they had gone the same, which was very rare to hit on the 100th place, I'd made it yellow. They went down, I turned it red. And so week to week, they saw, hey, last week on my first set, I was red, and then I was green on this next two sets. Let's see if I can get green all the way across. And so ultimately, they had not only a goal to chase, but they knew from previous weeks had they gotten faster or gotten slower. And so every time they stepped in the weight room, it was, again, static load for 5 weeks. And it drove this like natural competitive intent inside of them to want to beat the speed, right? And so we did that for 5 weeks. The first 3 weeks, they weren't practicing football. And then the next 2 weeks they were. So it ended up being 5 total weeks with 2 weeks of practice on the back end of that, followed by a spring scrimmage at the very end. So so I think, yeah, here we go. So there's your setup if you're looking for it. 3 sets of 2 at one load, pulled average load each week. That way they could see it and then repeat the workout week 2 with giving athlete the goal for the athlete to chase. And then we did that week to week to week. And then ultimately we got to spring scrimmage. Here's the 3 things that I sort of anecdotally saw. One, nobody got injured in spring practice. We had 0 injuries in spring practice. The year before we had like 4 or 5. None of them were season ending. They were knick-knack, sort of getting hit, weren't prepared for that kind of speed of play. Now, is that anecdotal 100,000%? But it does seem odd that we did some power work and nobody got hurt. It also could have been that Coach Guest pulled back a little bit. I don't know. 2, we were way more fast, like incredibly faster objectively. Like look at the GPS data. We were much faster on the field in the spring scrimmage than we were the previous year. And then not for nothing, we won, which was great. So that was the sort of last results. But I think the things that I care most about is in some of these graphics. I posted these graphics that week. These numbers are mind-blowing if you think about it from a strength and conditioning perspective. They for this first graphic you see right here, that was our total team, our entire team as a whole, all positions included, right? Skills, bigs, hybrids, all together went up an 18.1% in front squat speed. So think about it this way. That means if I squatted 300, I'm not great at math. I have to use my calculator, but if I squatted 300 at 0.5 meters per second week 1, right, then I went up 18% from that at the same speed. That's significant. So 5 weeks later, I'm moving the same load 18% faster. And I think what's more interesting is if you look at this next graphic, you'll see that they actually got faster. That the first week was March 5th, right? They got the second week when they went March 12th to March 19th, they got faster the second week than they did the first week because they began to understand the stimulus. Their body and their brain began to understand the game, and they got better and better week to week. And then you combine those 2 weeks together, right? You saw a 17.1% increase in speed over the course of just 3 weeks. So why is that significant? Those are the first 3 weeks of the program. So again, not for nothing. Um, we had 3 weeks of power increase work without the stimulus of practice, we saw 17% increase in speed. Now, there is an 18% increase in speed over here. What happened? Well, they started practice. So we still saw 1% increase in power and speed over the course of 2 weeks with the new stimulus of practice, the newness of that stimulus to their bodies and their fatigue level. We still saw an increase of speed, even still with that new added stressor, right? And so what I would say is it was a hypothesis. There's two things that are kind of important to note there. One, I would have never probably tried it during the regular season. Like I wouldn't have tried this during a regular season. I tried it during spring because spring ultimately doesn't change a ton. Like we don't we didn't gain we don't win or lose the playoff position or win or lose a state championship based on a spring game. And so spring is the perfect opportunity for a strength coach to try a theory out and see what it looks like in a regular type seasonal demand on their body. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's important. It was important for me as a strength coach to see less growth, not that there wasn't growth, but less increase in speed of their body when there was a stimulus of practice. And so it was important for me. I wanted to see how much did the stressor of practice impact what the actual results would do in the weight room. And so this was kind of cool to get to see what could happen if we didn't have practice and what will happen when we do. And so I say all that to say, um, we're playing in the Final Four this week, Friday. It's history for our football team. I came here 6 years ago. We had never made it. We'd never won a playoff game past the Elite Eight. Um, and since then, that was 6 years ago. Since then, we hadn't won a playoff game at all. This year, we've managed to, we're still winning. We're in the Final Four this week. And should we put it together, get to play in the state championship next week? Um, that which is cool. Now, I'm not saying BBT did that, but certainly it was a part of it. What we're seeing now, I took that same program, and when we finished the regular season and started the playoffs because of the hurricane. This is kind of cool. I mean, obviously, I couldn't have predicted a hurricane, but because of the hurricane in Georgia, in North Carolina, we had an extra bye week. So that means we finished our regular season. There's normally a bye week, right? And then we got a first round bye. So we got 2 weeks off, right? And then we started the playoffs, right? We're in the third week. So how many weeks is that? That's 5 weeks. So what do you think we're doing? I'm literally just emulating the program we did in the spring. And so I actually showed the guys this week. I wish I could quickly. I pulled this up, but I didn't. I actually pulled up the back end for our for Perch and showed them the results as our team speed increased throughout from the first bye week till today. They're still doing the same type thing. We did it in cluster sets, which I'll explain in a second. But they're seeing an overall team increase in speed at a static load across multiple weeks headed into Final Four. Now, why is that significant? One, for me as a strength coach, I know that we are getting stronger probably, but we're definitely getting faster. And again, the GPS has another layer there that helps us see that on the field. But the second thing that it helps me with is the guys. I can say, hey, remember in spring when we did this? Remember how we felt when we got to the spring game? They're like, oh yeah. I was like, we're doing the same thing. We're going into Final Four. And so I pull up the thing, let them see the data, let them see the growth, let them understand, and then just as a team get gathered around this idea of we're going to get faster every week. It's important, right? Sort of internally drive that desire to get faster. And it has worked the same way we saw in spring happening now in the fall. The only thing we did different was in the spring, I did straight sets. So they did 3 sets of 2. Right now they're doing cluster sets. So and what that means is instead of doing 3 sets of 2, they're doing 6 singles with about a 30-second rest in between the singles. It started at 6 singles. It was 3 singles this week, so it'll sort of slowly go down in volume. But why are we doing cluster sets? Because what we did see was when certain guys at 85% or so, that second rep began to get a little grindy. And so you would see a velocity drop more than about 10% that I wasn't super comfortable with. And so because we're in season playoffs, like my whole game is on the line with the state championship on the line. I wanted to eliminate any unnecessary fatigue. And so we went to cluster sets and went, so 1 rep racket. It's actually a group of 3 people, right? So if partner 1 will squat, racket, get out of the way. Second person will go squat, racket. Third person will go squat, racket. And so it lets them have, 20 to 30 seconds or so of rest in between those singles to drive true sort of cluster type specific hypertrophy and eliminate any residual fatigue that's not necessary. And then, team again, we're seeing week to week increase in power. So,
Spencer,
um,
sorry to interject, but to
yep,
that end too, we have a
but I
question
needed to take a
about.
breath anyway.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. To that end about increase in power, we have a question just about the front squat increase of 18% over the duration of this 5 week period. What was the improvement in power output? And it could be that you're getting to this right now.
Yeah, so I to come at me here, and I actually should look this up for where we are currently. I didn't post the wattage, right? Because the kids don't care about wattage. They understand miles per hour, meters per second. So I didn't actually post it. So I'd have to go back and look. But I'm pretty sure that they were linear, right? So they matched together. So as velocity went up, obviously, right? Like this is basic physics, right? As velocity went up at static load, so did power. And so that they were linear together. And so we saw that both the average velocity of the set and the power average wattage of the set increased at about the same rate of speed, or the same percentage increase throughout the weeks. I'd have to go back and get you exact numbers, but they're very, very similar. When we charted them, they almost matched exactly. Both were trending obviously positive. If I saw power decrease, we would have hit the eject button quickly. So they mirrored each other in the sense that as velocity went up, so did power. If that's helpful. But I'd actually, one of the fun things, not that you mentioned that, it's a good question. I would love to see if we're seeing any sort of differences in percentage of power increase, wattage increase from the straight sets of the spring versus the cluster sets of the fall. It'd be cool to see if there's an increase. I haven't actually looked to get actual percentage increase in speed and wattage, other than just to look at the velocity over time on the perch backside on the backside of the app and look and see that. But yeah, as the speed increased, we saw a wattage increase. That answer? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
Cool. Good question. Because ultimately, that's what I was chasing, right? Was power increase, not speed increase. But kids understand and care about velocity more than they care about wattage. They don't. I bet if I asked them how many watts are in a light bulb, they wouldn't even know that watts are in a light bulb, right? Like they don't understand what wattage is. They don't understand any of that. They don't understand any difference in wattage and light. Anyway, you get it. I'm not gonna beat that horse. They understand miles per hour and they understand meters per second. Um, okay, so back to this. The one thing that I would say as you're as I'm sort of producing this for you for the first, it's important to remember that I'm in year 6. We've had perch for 5 of those 6 years that I've been here. Um, so my kids have had a lot of time with the technology. This probably would not have worked if it was the first year that they had velocity in the weight room, because they have to be familiar enough with the tech and familiar enough with the usage of the tech to be able to understand what 0.5 meters per second looks like, and what does that feel like, and what is the difference in 0.3 and 0.8. They don't necessarily know the difference in what that strength trait is being developed, but they know what they feel like when they do a front squat at 1 meters per second versus 0.3. And so that would be my first cautionary piece to you, is if you're gonna thinking about doing this, make sure that it's not the first thing you do, right? The first thing you should do is just let the tech run, like let them do a normal workout and let them see it. Let them set the thresholds and let them see that it turns a certain color when they get below a certain speed, and that's bad. And just start to have them familiarity with the tech, then begin to like, hey, I need you to do 5 sets above this speed, and let them like fluctuate and figure that out about how to change their body and change their intent and change their pressure into the floor to meet the demands that you're setting for them. and then do something like this. But all of that process takes time. Don't just jump right into something like this if they're not familiar with the tech. The second warning I would give you is make sure you have guys that care as much about the speed of the bar as they do about the load on it. And so that a little bit goes back to you as a coach, making the speed on the bar more important than the load on the bar. One of my favorite stories is I had a kid. We squatted 400 pounds for the first time ever, and that was back when 400 pounds was a really big squat for us. But he came running up to me. He's like, Coach, I squatted 400 pounds and it was 0.5 meters per second, and he was as excited about the speed of that as he was the load on the bar. When you get to a point like that, you can do something like this. If you don't have kids or a program or just a sort of an aura in your program where speed wins or speed matters or speed's a big deal, and you haven't created that type of culture, this program will not work. Like, in fact, you'll probably get slower and they'll probably get really bored. And you'll lose your room. So if you don't have a culture where the speed of that bar matters, you don't do this. First of all, I'd say reassess your culture and develop that. But second, this program won't work if they don't care, if it's just about completion for them instead of about how fast they're completing that work. So um, yeah, that's what I would be a cautionary tale towards. You can obviously do this with all kinds of things: front squat, bench press, back squat. Probably can do it with something as simple as a deadlift. Although I would tell you that if you're trying to turn a deadlift into a really fast movement, it's going to just end up being a clean pull. And so, be careful with that because you start playing with technical issues. That would be the other thing. Just make sure that they're not changing their technique to make the bar go faster, that they're maintaining good technique, and that's what's driving speed. Um, and I said there'd be a another like cautionary disclaimer at the back end of that. Remember that every strength coach in the world is using velocity. Some just know they're using it and some don't. Every time you program 80%, you're programming a specific velocity in your brain. The beauty of something like Perch or any VBT tech for that matter is that you get to objectify the velocity you think you're programming. And so don't think VBT as a training philosophy, but really it's just objectifying your training philosophy that you're already doing. It's not. I don't think velocity-based training is this new hip training plan or training philosophy. I just think it's some technology that's allowing us to put objective qualities around a training philosophy we already have. And so don't let it change your training philosophy. Let it bring your training philosophy from black and white into color. So yeah, I think I'm way shorter than I thought I'd be, Nika, which never happens. But maybe we got some questions. If not, it's a pretty straightforward concept, a pretty straightforward type plan. I will tell you this, that the one challenge is on the back end. You got to you got to sit in your office and pull those numbers, and you got to print them. You got to put them on a piece of paper and print them and then rehang them. So there's a little bit of some back end work there. Anyway, here's some ways you can connect. And that's my dude there as well.
Looking great. Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate the time. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in that Q&A channel. We'll stick around for a minute or two. Here now, I do have a quick question here. Just from me, Spencer, but just curious, like, are you is this something that can be leveraged sort of across exercises, or is this something that's very specific to like your squat or your major lifts, your squats, your deadlifts, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's easiest done about on major lifts, right? Because one, because the kids are most familiar with them, so squat, bench press, are probably deadlift to some degree are most easily done. I would say that and this is just a philosophical concept, like anytime you're going to drive kids or athletes at all, when you want to drive them to chase speed, the best athletes are natural, like they're just natural overcomers. Like they adapt the best. And so if I have them do it with a bent over row and we're going to pursue power on a bent over row, what you're probably going to see instead of like true actual power increase is you're going to see them change how they do the movement in order to drive the bar speed. What we don't want is that. Like, and so I would just say never pick an exercise where the movement itself can be changed to make the speed go faster, because they may not actually be increasing speed. They're just changing how they do it to create more leverage to create more speed. And so the reason squat and bench are like gold mines for something like this is because it's if you have good technique, it's pretty hard to change that exercise enough to see a measurable difference in the bar speed, other than something like literally jumping off the ground, right, or coming up on your toes or something, which is pretty easy to spot. Some of those other exercises, like a pull up, or a bent row or something like that, that we do track and measure. You can imagine how somebody's going to change their pull up to go faster. You're going to end up kipping or whatever, you know. So that I would just say be careful about the more complex the movement gets, the higher chance that a good athlete is just going to modify how they do it to drive speed rather than rather than actually go faster.
Right. No, that makes sense. Um, Great. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll let you go. But I appreciate the time and the prep work and the concept too, just in general. But anyone who's in attendance here still, obviously Spencer put his contact information up there, so feel free to reach out with any additional questions and anything for Perch as well. So thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.